Jennifer, I guess my question really is to you. MSF clearly is an amazing organisation. You know, it delivers care to people in horrible situations. And you think Gaza and Afghanistan, Myanmar. But there seems to be a problem where MSF in the end finds itself in places where the regime does not share our values of humanity, of common dignity and caring for people. And so my question really is, how does MSF, with its boards of governance, balance this tension that exists between providing care for people who otherwise would have no care, but then risking indirectly enabling corrupt and bad, wicked regimes? In the end, you have a lot of financial donors. You know, the Australia-New Zealand branch of MSF gets $100 million a year in donations. And as a donor, I think I'd be horrified to think that $1 of my money ended up in the pocket of an Hamas leader or Taliban fighter or one of the military junta in Myanmar.
Jennifer?
So we are a $100 million organisation, and I can't thank the supporters enough for sticking with us through all of the atrocities that have happened over the last years. And we are a neutral organisation. And what that means is when negotiating access to civilians who are being harmed in a conflict, or anyone who's being harmed in a conflict, we will talk to all sides of a conflict, no matter how distasteful those sides may be perceived to be by outside parties. We are also a medical organisation, and here in Sydney, the first thing that someone says in an emergency room isn't to, find out whether or not someone's committed a crime, hurt someone, or whether they're in a gang when they have a critical injury. So we will stitch up whoever comes to our hospital because that is what medical ethics are about. It puts us in a difficult position at times, that is absolutely true, but those are the values on which we stand.
Keith, obviously, channeling aid to aid organisations and where it goes is contentious, as is clear from the question. But do you think it's satisfactory as an answer in terms of the way that these organisations have to plan these things?
It's an important question because when we look at the domains of war, traditionally it was land and sea, then we had air, now we've got cyber and space. But a key domain of war is information, and there's an information war happening around the world. And organisations like MSF, who do fantastic work and are really needed here, there's got to be careful they don't play into that information war. And an example happens here right now, which is when you say there should be a ceasefire, that is a euphemism for whether Israel has a right to exist. Because if Israel has a right to exist, then it has a right to defend itself. And any nation who had an attack like that must react, must eliminate Hamas. There's nothing else that's acceptable.
Just want to challenge you on that. Calling for a ceasefire isn't contesting Israel's right to exist, is it?
It is, because you have to say...
But it's not for many people who are articulating it. Because there are Jewish people articulating it.
Of course.
And they want Israel to exist.
Of course. That's not the intent of everyone.
They're not calling for Israel to be abolished. They're saying they want a ceasefire to end the death.
But for some, it is. For some, it is, because you have to ask the counterfactual. Because if you say there's a ceasefire, well, how long will that last? And a ceasefire, you've made the distinction between a pause and a ceasefire, so there's an implication it's permanent. What does Israel get to do to defend itself after that attack? And I ask, if that attack occurred in Egypt or Syria or Lebanon, can you just imagine the reaction? No state, Australia wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Israel is entitled to defend itself. It has an obligation to defend itself.
Matilda?
I mean, I guess I would... If we're taking things through and saying, OK, if we do this, what are the consequences? What are the consequences if we see Israel enact its entire plan? Disassemble Hamas, destroy its capacity. What then? I mean, it's not like the entire idea of Hamas is going to have disappeared. It's not like, we know that organisations like this, it's, cut off one head, 3 more grow. There's a question about when we get to the end of this, even if there isn't a ceasefire, even if Israel is utterly successful, are we going to have left this region at all in a state where it is able to self-govern anyway? It's not clear to me that it's one or the other. You continue and it's total success, or you have a ceasefire and then everything collapses.
Di?
Look, I think I was listening to Keith, and I think, of course, Israel has the right to defend itself. I don't think anybody questioned that. I think the ceasefire is about giving that space to, because to look at the whole human, human impact and the killings, and to find a way to really allow aid to get in, allow people to be, if people can be saved, or children can be saved. Because if we look at the destruction, if we look at what's happening at the moment in Gaza, I'm not there on the ground, and no one is on the ground there. But what we see on television, and hopefully you think, oh my God, how true is this? The devastation. Like, if there's no ceasefire, are we eliminating a whole population there? Is that what Israel, and I'm sure Israel would not want that to happen. What we're seeing is, are we moving towards eliminating that whole group of people there?
How big an issue is this in your electorate?
Look, I've had over 200, probably every day I'll get an email from local constituents, people in my electorate calling, asking the government, our government, to really ask for a ceasefire. And it is impacting a large proportion of the people in Fowler. People from diverse backgrounds, so it's not any particular ethnic group, but diverse backgrounds who are seeing, especially I think there are a lot of Vietnamese names, and I think they have seen wars, they've seen the impact of war, so they're asking, please speak up and ask for a ceasefire. So I think until you've been through a war, you've lived through a war, you really don't know why, for people like myself, we're calling for a ceasefire.
Mark Butler, can you imagine your government calling for a ceasefire? Is there a tipping point?
Well, I think there would have to be the prospect of a settlement between the two parties. And I think to a degree we're getting into semantics here. What I think everyone is calling for, including the Americans now, is for hostilities to cease or pause while there's a flow of humanitarian supplies into Gaza. No one said exactly how long it would be. I think everyone agrees, though. Israel hasn't got to this position, but everyone from outside, I think, reasonably agrees we need to pause this to allow supplies to enter. But I think the idea that Israel and Hamas are going to come to a settlement anytime soon is a fantasy. And I think Penny Wong outlined over the weekend our government's views about the longer game here, because to Matilda's point, at some point people have to turn their minds to what happens next. And I think from our point of view, the dismantling of Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation listed by our government, is a precondition to peace there, but that means that we're going to have to see a different type of administration in the Palestinian territories, a reformed, peaceful Palestinian Authority that will have to involve support from other Arab governments around the region. There's going to have to be huge international investment in economic development in those territories. We've seen in Ireland the benefit of that to deliver a lasting peace. And as Penny said also in her article, Israel has to stop building more settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories if we really are going to have a prospect of a two-state solution. Now, I think that solution is further out of reach than at any time I can remember, but we have to keep our eye on that as the ultimate objective.